There was a story that came out yesterday after the New York Knicks game that Spike Lee was thrown out of the game. He was thrown out because he came through. What was it?
He came through an entrance that's supposed to be specific for people with disabilities. I think it was media and I want to say security or something like that. He came through that entrance instead of the celebrity entrance, which is specific to obviously the Knicks fans that are on Celebrity Row. So he came into those entrance. I guess he was doing it a lot in the past, and now finally James Dolan, it was the end of it for him, and he threw him out of the Garden. And Spike Lee announced today that he's not going to be going to any games for the rest of the season. Dolan did not formally throw him out, like ban him from the Garden like he did with Charles Oakley, but I would imagine if Spike Lee keeps getting annoyed at him, he could lead to something like that where he doesn't go to games anymore.
It's really, really interesting when you think about James Dolan. Everybody knows about the Charles Oakley thing and the fight between Charles Oakley and James Dolan, and then the security guard, and then Charles Oakley had to be escorted outside of Madison Square Garden. He went all over the media centers from ESPN to CBS to NBC, speaking bad about James Dolan and the New York Knicks organization, how they never treated him with the proper respect that he deserves as an ex-New York Knick and a big-time power forward that the Knicks had for their not championship years, but their great years
of the 90s. You said he was your favorite player growing up,
Yes,
right?
he was.
Yeah.
He was my favorite player growing up. I loved his mean streak. I loved the fact that he went up there, he pushed people, he threw people. He was a true New Yorker, and he came from Chicago, from the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, and really he was the last piece the Knicks needed to be a championship competitive team. Now, I don't want to hear about Charles Smith and Xavier McDaniel and all the other players the Knicks had, the Charlie Wards, the Chris Childs, the Allen Houstons from the late 90s. The importance of the New York Knicks organization from 1990 all the way up to 97, when the Knicks were at their best. The Knicks were great from 90 to really 96, 97. That was when the Knicks were a good team, and they were a winning organization. They won almost 50 games every single year. They were in the playoffs every single year, and they competed against Miami, Chicago, Orlando, the good teams of the Eastern Conference. When you look at James Dolan, I don't blame James Dolan for the Knicks woes. I know a lot of fans like to blame him and say, well, because he's the owner of the team, the Knicks are never going to win. This has nothing to do with James Dolan. It really doesn't. Now, this particular thing with Charles Oakley and Spike Lee has everything to do with James Dolan. Does that keep away players from coming to play for the organization? It shouldn't. James Dolan opens his pockets. He pays for these players to play for his organization. He overpays players. He overpaid Tim Hardaway Jr. He has overpaid players to come over there. Julius Randle for a 3-year contract, even though I think they underpaid him. But for a guy that really had one good season, Julius Randle, what is he getting? $17 million a year? Mm-hmm. So when you look at James Dolan, he's not cheap. He's not the Wilpons. So I don't want to hear that, he's as bad as the Wilpons.
But again, when it comes to the star players and where everyone can give the same kind of max contract, obviously each team has 3 max contract spots, they could give the same maximum thing. Something has to be shying away from a big market like the Knicks, because other big markets haven't had trouble. LA hasn't had trouble getting their players.
Which is crazy because Miami, you have 2 idiots running that organization.
Right. Miami hasn't had trouble. Chicago in the past didn't have trouble. There's one big market that's the Knicks having trouble. Even the Nets got KG. They got Paul Pierce. Now they got Durant and Kyrie Irving. And so something is the commonality of that. So that's why I think it does still matter with James Dolan, whatever connections he has with these players, whatever the agents are with these players, something is shying them away. And I feel like he does put a stain on the Knicks.
Well, obviously, the players are looking at James Dolan as he's a cancer for the organization. But again, when a guy opens up his pockets, it shouldn't be a reason why players do not want to play for this organization. If you have young players, you have good talent, and I'm not saying the Knicks do. I won't say the Knicks do have that kind of talent yet. R.J. Barrett showed glimpses of it the other day. He looked very, very good against Houston. You heard what James Harden said. And my question is R.J. Barrett going to flee the New York Knicks when he becomes a free agent after all these particular things are happening right now with the organization. I do believe in the next couple of years, James Dolan will sell off the team. I don't think he'll sell off Madison Square Garden, but I could see him selling off the Rangers and the Knicks. I do see that. But when you look at the New York Knicks in this organization and really what goes on behind closed doors, we all know about Isaiah Thomas and how much James Dolan loved Isaiah Thomas. And we all know about the whole situation with Mills and how Mills has been a big fan favorite for him, for James Dolan, because James Dolan loved Steve Mills. I always mess up names. I'm sorry. Steve Mills. But if you look at the Knicks organization as a whole, and you look at James Dolan and you look at the way this organization is moving in the better direction now that they bring in, to me, a good GM. I think he's going to be a good GM for this team, even though he's never been a GM yet in his career. I think he's one of the best agents in all of professional sports. This guy has gotten contracts for LeBron James. He's gotten contracts for all the Dwayne Wade, all the big names that you've heard in the NBA. This is a guy that has been an agent for all these teams and all these players. So this guy has produced and really given good contracts and gotten good contracts for these players that I just mentioned.
If he can use that agent leverage to lure these guys in, it could work. But again, you do have the other end of it too with the ownership. How much are they going to take value in the Knicks? And for a team with young players, how much are these superstar players going to value how their young players develop? We both agree that Barrett's going to develop into something special.
Yes.
But again, what about these other guys? What about the guys
Kevin Knox
on the roster last year? How will they develop to take the next step? Because right now they have had there's flashes at times. Mitchell Robinson, I think, is a good player for what he is. But again, in a shooting league, how much are other players going to value a top-end center like that if he does develop into one?
But you can't blame James Dolan for that. That's why he brings in a GM. Steve Mills didn't do his job as the president of the organization when he took over for the great Phil Jackson, who to me has been an absolute waste, and the Knicks are still paying. I mean, when they brought in Derek Fisher, I mean, he came into the team for a year and a half. He was fired.
Puppet, right?
They just finished paying off him.
Right.
And now you brought in David Fizdale. David Fizdale signed a 4-year deal. How long was he a New York Knicks head coach? 2 years? And you can't blame James Dolan for that.
What I do think, though, to an extent, even though we don't know what Rose is yet as a GM, you wonder if his reputation and his stench on the Knicks has shied away potentially better GMs that they could have had, which could have helped them build better, from a basketball standpoint, just better teams. Because the Knicks have been bad drafting for a while, probably because they couldn't get top-end GMs. They've been bad at, again, bringing in gem talent, I guess, younger talent.
What's a gem talent? I mean, you talk about Kevin Durant.
Bargain contracts.
Kevin Durant is 32 years old. Bargain contracts. Give me a bargain contract right now in the NBA that's going to be a free agent this year. I'm sorry. There is no bargain contracts in the NBA. When you look at the CBA and how the CBA went up, Tim Hardaway Jr. got $74 million from the New York Knicks. Is that a bargain contract? I mean, seriously, there's no such thing as a bargain contract now when you look at the NBA and the way the CBA and the TV deals that they have, TNT and all the NBC and ESPN, all the different contracts that they have throughout the country, throughout the world right now with the NBA. I look at the NBA right now, and you cannot blame James Dolan. Now, the whole Spike Lee thing, is it going to turn away players to come to the New York Knicks because Spike Lee is not coming to watch a New York Knicks game? I don't think so. I really don't. Now, Spike Lee is a New York Knicks fan. Now, he could really turn his back on the Knicks and go become a Brooklyn Nets fan. He could do that. If he wants to shove it down the Knicks' throat, he could do that. I can't see Spike Lee doing that because he's been a Knicks fan his whole career.
I don't think he's going to do that, but him attending games, I think, is still something that's up in the air. I think as of right now, from what I've heard, he's not going to sell his fandom or anything like that. He's not going to switch fan bases.
A.K.A. Evan Permuta.
Yeah, he's not going to do anything like that. But again, he's still frustrated at the organization for what he is and what the fame he brings to Madison Square Garden every night, really.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of fame that comes to Madison Square Garden.
Of course, but he's been one of the longest ones for a long time.
New York has been a corporate America place for Madison Square Garden. When you look at the fans out in the out in the audience and out in all the different fans.
Celebrity row, yeah.
It's not even celebrities. It's political. You see all these senators. You see all these different people there that have nothing to do with the fans out there. You'll see fans here and there out in the audience, but more and more you're seeing it's more becoming corporate America. And that's what Madison Square Garden is now. When you see Taylor Swift, I don't want to hear about Taylor Swift being a Knicks fan. She's not a Knicks fan. She goes over there because she knows she's a celebrity and it's the place to be. New York, Madison Square Garden is the place to be. And that's why when you talk about Panarin went to the Rangers because of Madison Square Garden. It had nothing to do why he thought the Rangers have a better chance of winning than the Islanders, because that's not true. The Islanders were a better team last year, not the Rangers. Why did Panarin decide to go to the Rangers? He went to the Rangers because of Madison Square Garden, playing in the world's most famous arena. And that's why a lot of people thought that LeBron James would do that. A lot of people thought that all these different athletes, Kobe Bryant, when he became a free agent, maybe Kobe would come to New York and give the Knicks a championship. None of those guys went there. And it had nothing to do with James Dolan. It had everything to do with their respectable teams, with the LA Lakers, or even LeBron James. LeBron James didn't want to come here because I don't think LeBron James wants the pressure. There's more pressure in New York than any other place. In Madison Square Garden, where the Knicks haven't won in almost 50 years, he went to a team like the Heat, where they've won a championship with Shaquille O'Neal, with Dwayne Wade, and he went with two other players that he respected and he wanted to play with. So I don't blame James Dolan, even though everybody wants to blame James Dolan why LeBron James never played for the New York Knicks. LeBron never wanted to go to the Knicks, and that had a lot to do with Phil Jackson too, because of what he said about his posse.
That was before.
No, I'm just saying he could have came to the New York Knicks when his contract was up in Miami. It was because of Phil Jackson. You're going to blame James Dolan for that too, because of what Phil Jackson said about the posse? That wasn't James Dolan's fault. Now, the whole Charles Oakley thing, players should not be getting involved with what the owner thinks of a player. Okay? I'm sorry. That's the way I look at when you look at the whole growth of the New York Knicks organization and the Rangers organization, or any professional sports team. When you look at a professional sports team as a whole, you cannot blame the owner because he spends money. You can't blame the owner because his GM's not doing his job. And you can't blame the owner that the GM decided to bring in players that didn't fit the offense, the triangle offense, or Jeff Hornacek, or bringing in all these different coaches that they had over the years. That's not James Dolan's fault. Now, he has to sign off on it, but he trusts in Phil Jackson. He trusts in Steve Mills. He trusted in all the GMs that he's had in place. That is not his fault. He paid these guys to do a job, and they didn't do their job. Now, is that Phil Jackson's fault? Yes. Is that Steve Mills' fault? Yes. That's why they're no longer with the organization. Now, I'm not saying James Dolan is a saint, because he's not. He is definitely not a saint. This guy has been a liar. He's been on ESPN. He's been on, well, he doesn't even go on WFAN anymore because WFAN don't even want him there. But he's been on Michael K's show. He said what he felt, and he spoke. He's taking shots at some of the different things that have happened over the last couple of years in his garden. But again, James Dolan is a man. He's a rich man that opens up his pockets for his players. Now, if I was an NBA player, and the NBA is all about money. Professional sports is a business now. It's not about, well, I want to play for the Knicks because I want to give them their next championship. The only reason why Kevin Durant didn't come to the New York Knicks is because the Knicks didn't give him the contract that he wanted. The Knicks didn't even offer him a contract. That's the only reason why Kevin Durant didn't come to the New York Knicks, because everybody and their mother knew that Kevin Durant wanted to play in New York and for the Knicks, not for the Brooklyn Nets. He went to the Brooklyn Nets because Kyrie Irving was there, and
they were essentially a package deal.
And the Nets gave him what he wanted. He wanted Jordan there. Jordan is there. He wanted his $150, $160 million or whatever he got. He got his money.